Okay, so real quick, because I just watched the video and I'm getting ready to post it, and I just want to let you know, quick warning, if you're used to my typical AI philosophy or AI and cognition videos, this is not it. This is a way more personal video that talks about how all of that theory came to be, but from a personal point of view, right? And it deals with themes of grief, trauma, and therapy, and it might not be for everybody. So if you want some of the more technical or philosophical views on AI, I recommend you watch the other videos. If you want to know how those views came to be, then definitely stick around for this one. Thank you so much and enjoy the video.
Everybody, RBR LPCI here, and it's been about a month since I made a video, and in all of my videos I kind of circle around the same issue, which has to do with cognition and artificial intelligence. But every time that I'm going in circles, I'm avoiding a central topic. So I figured that this, idleness of a month that I've taken would be a good reset to maybe come back and hit you with that central topic. So today I'm going to start with a little bit more of a personal story. I'm going to tell you about how I learned to leverage AI to assist me with mental health assistance at probably the most difficult time of my life. And that was with my dad's passing last year, and this period of grief that's been, this year and couple months since. And how I've used it to transform my thinking, to address some unaddressed probably traumas from the past, and how out of that I developed what is LPCI and this whole theory of AI that I've been working on and that I've been kind of circling around but never quite addressing it head on. So let's get to it. This is not a scripted video. This is not something that I have prepared and like, okay, I'm going to talk about da. This is more just me opening up and talking about how I leveraged AI in a way that helped me tremendously, and how that turned into this whole theory of, philosophy and AI, and me quitting my job and funding an AI company. So let's get to it. So I think it was around June 31st. Last year, summer of last year, I found out, through my mom's friends that my dad had passed away. They told me over the phone. For context, he was in Spain. I never had, past 9 years old, much of a relationship with him. I'm in the US, he's in Spain. I hadn't spoken with him in years. And it actually hit me. It actually hit me, really hard. I've dealt with grief before, but it was always grief about somebody that I loved and that was really present in my life, and not about somebody that I hadn't gotten closure with, or I was going through tumultuous times. So it was weird, because the other times that I've experienced grief, I had a shared grief with other people that were also dealing with it, and I had people I could talk to, and I had a support group. But this time, given family dynamics, which I'm sure we all have different, right? That was not possible for me. I was pretty much alone. And I was at the time working at a nonprofit here in Miami. I was, keeping busy. I was probably working more than I ever did, but I was going through it. And for me, grief showed up not as crying or not as sadness or dullness, but more like recursive loop of self-analyzing and of pondering things way too much. That's just how I am as a person. And, circumstances lined up where, like, you don't get closure with somebody that was, your father, and you're on the other side of the world. You don't, all these things that you don't get, it affects you, right? So it took a bigger toll on me than I think than I thought it would take. It was affecting me in my work. It was affecting me with people, and it was affecting me in general. It was affecting me. And around this time, I started tinkering with AI. Mostly at first, it was just for work. It was just, autocomplete an email, or you get told to do something and you leverage AI to get it done in 5 minutes instead of 3 hours, right? And it actually worked out quite well for me. But I've always really liked language, and I actually would get home at the end of the day and would start, just like you could use AI to analyze texts, to analyze this or analyze that, I started to use it to analyze me, how I feel, how I write, what my writing says about me, so that I could understand better things about me that are maybe here or here, but they're not in my conscious mind, right? And maybe I have to analyze it, and through that, I could understand myself better. And so I started doing that, doing everything from, hey, analyze my current linguistic print and tell me how I'm feeling that I might not see, to, explaining a situation that maybe I experienced in childhood and trying to see how this other person who maybe I framed a specific way, how they would have perceived it, right? And maybe try to not vilify somebody, right? Just a lot of different ways of poking at my preconceived notions and poking at AI just to see, what there was to know that I could know, that I could understand, to get some clarity. I couldn't know the truth about a lot of things. I never will, but I could get clarity for myself and I could accept it. And yeah, it was tremendously helpful for me. And I'm somebody that was extremely averse to therapists my whole life. I remember actually, going to them when I was younger, different reasons. And I remember once when I was going through a specific struggle, and I remember talking to this therapist about it. And what she told me at the time was basically, look, this person that you're dealing with, narcissistic personality disorder, yada, yada, yada. It's not you, it's them. It's not you, it's them. And I remember coming back home that day and thinking, it's them, it's not me, right? And I must have been around 18 at the time. I'm 28 now. And now that I think of it and I think of what I told this therapist, I realized that what I was saying was very one-sided and very biased, right? So I was not giving this therapist a fair assessment of the situation. And what she did is, instead of being able to say, hey, look, I'm a mental health professional, you're being extremely biased right now, let's try to parse that, she just took my narrative and ran with it and projected her own beliefs into it, kind of like an LLM would, right, with the training, right? Projected her own beliefs and said, this person, narcissistic personality disorder, instead of just telling me, hey, look, you're 18, what you're going through is normal. Most people go through this at some point in their life. Most people have arguments with people they love, or they misunderstand it because yada, 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 right? Things can be circumstantial. They don't have to be prognostical always, right? They could just be circumstantial. So, when I was able to finally beat that situation and start to see that the therapist in this case had embedded her own bias and her own projections and taken my bias story and ran with it, I realized I don't know if I could really trust a mental health professional. Through my life and through other, I don't know if I could really trust a mental health professional, because I don't know their biases, and I don't know that they know. I don't know that they know, right? So it makes it really difficult for me, even now when I think of it, to want to go to a therapist to triangulate with them a solution to something, when it's somebody whose biases I do not know. I do not know if they're projecting. I do not know how they will project. And maybe they don't, right? But what if they do? What if they do and you don't have that ability to see their biases? Because it's somebody that you see in an in-office setting for 1 hour. You don't know what their life is like. You don't know what their biases are like, right? So for me personally, for the way that I am, I knew that when I was dealing with the grief, a therapist wasn't going to fix it. So for me personally, what worked was triangulating towards clarity with AI. Because obviously AI, it's, you could say it's a mirror and you could say it's biased too, and both of those things are true. But both of those things I know and I can play with, right? So when AI is a mirror, I could take the mirror distortions. I have a book here, Olafur Eliasson. He talks about mirror distortions, and amazing artist, talks about perception, and beautiful artist. He's changed my life in a lot of ways. And when I see maybe I'm doing some work with AI and I see a mirror distortion that doesn't embody what I told it, sometimes that distortion could give me some feedback or some food for thought, right? And I know that it's a distortion. And, you know, I just feel more comfortable myself using AI because I've learned to use it, and I've learned that, it has biases and I could play with those biases. But with a therapist, you cannot, right? So, that was what led me to kind of develop a subjective triangulation towards clarity framework, where I basically realized, okay, well, I have my biases, and the AI has its biases, and it's gonna pick up my biases, but I could kind of keep the AI a little bit in check, and the AI could keep me a little bit in check. And although we have two biased perspectives, we could parse through each other and get some clarity. But to be able to get that clarity, you have to know where both of those biased perspectives part from, right? And for me, with an LLM, I could kind of tinker it and play enough that I know at one point where it kind of is, and I know where I am. And we could kind of triangulate. But with a therapist, I never felt that way. Especially now that I think of it, you don't know where they are. You don't, unless unless you've screened them extensively, you're not gonna know where they are and their biases. So it's it's a weird topic for me to discuss. So if I'm cutting up, just please take it as part of the video. You could watch some of the other videos for more structured videos. But I think, it's not even a contest on in my life which one has helped me more. And that's not to discredit therapists. I actually think, when I was having my mother try my own, framework that I developed off of the LPCI framework, she was telling me, son, you don't, the therapists are gonna be done for. And I actually don't think so, because if anything, this would be a great tool for therapists to use and to see past their own biases. And number one. And number two, I don't think I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I don't think most people have that that drive to get epistemic clarity and to analyze even their own biases and to self-check themselves, right? I think it requires a very specific sort of person that's very inquisitive, that's very skeptical, almost like a systematic skepticism. If you don't have that, you're better off with a therapist. But the fact of the matter is that AI can be such an amazing tool for mental health, if leveraged properly. It could also be extremely destructive, and I talk about this in some of my other videos. Things like consciousness mirages, things like somebody getting into an extremely recursive conversation that ends up taking them down weird rabbit holes. You have to know how to use it, but it can be extremely powerful. And that's why, with so much talk about the AI bubble and everything that everybody seems to be talking about, I'm not really worried, because, and I'll make a whole video about this in the next video, but I'm not really worried, because a lot of those AI consultants, AI companies, etc., they're not really looking at any of this stuff. They're kind of often just copy pasting prompts, or they're giving people prompts without explaining the purpose of it or how language works, right? And I do think in that sense, the AI bubble is very real, in the sense that you have a lot of people that don't know how to use it, telling you how to use it. But I believe in other ways, we're only scratching the surface of the surface. We're only scratching the surface of the surface. And, it's an extremely useful tool. It's an extremely useful tool. And furthermore, you could take these LLMs and do a lot of work yourself. But you could leverage the power of LLMs to create tools that are, meant specifically for this purpose, right? So I'll put the link below. I always put the links below, but if you go to my website, lpci.ai, and you go to the gallery, or you go to aichain.ai, you'll see that we basically created a a linguistic diagnosis tool that's a self-betterment tool that helps you see how you're feeling and helps you see the biases you might have and see the context and the situation in a way that it then gives you some advice in the form of an I Ching hexagram, right? So it's basically a self-help tool. And a lot of these AI therapy tools that I see are very basic. They're, a lot of the use cases that you see online for people using AI for therapy are kind of like feel goody. I think it's starting to evolve where people are really starting to leverage linguistic print, etc. But we're just scratching the surface, if you ask me. We really are just scratching the surface. And I took this month off to think about a lot of stuff, do a lot of work. But I will tell you this: I am really excited about what's coming up in the next couple of years. I'm really excited about what LPCI Innovations has, in store and has planned. And if AI is in a bubble right now, which I think that part of it is true with the consultants, with the overly investing in things people don't understand. Let it be, let it die out a little bit, and then the real deal, not the fluff and the hype, but the substance, what matters to you, what matters to me, what changes your life, and not what changes some salesman's life, that's gonna stick. And that we're only scratching the surface of. So if you're thinking of, leveraging AI for your mental health, or you've already been doing it, but you wanna improve how you do it, or maybe find new ways to do it, feel free to reach out to me. LPCI Innovations is currently working on pilot programs with different sets of organizations or individuals. We're currently working with a couple of researchers. We are getting into the nonprofit field, given that that's what I've done. And I'd love to, hopefully work with either a therapist or a mental health expert, or even somebody that just wants to learn to leverage these tools for themselves. So if that's you, I will have my form below, my Calendly, so you can schedule some 45-minute discussion so we could talk about these things. And I'd be eager to meet with anybody. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the video. I will have my links with the website, my Twitter, yada, yada, yada. It's really important, actually, if you could please like the video, and if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you do enjoy the content, so I could keep making more. I'm not the sort of guy to push sales or to, do this stuff at the beginning of the video. So if you could help me out, that'd mean a lot. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.